The haunting wasn't the real horror. Before the ghosts, 6 people were murdered in their beds, and the legend may have buried the evidence beneath a best-selling nightmare. Most people know Amityville as a haunted house. I used to think of it that way too. A family moves in, strange things happen, they flee, and America gets one of its most famous ghost stories. That version is clean, scary, and easy to repeat. But when I started separating the court record from the entertainment, the story changed. The address stayed the same, but the center of gravity moved. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether a house was haunted. The question was how a real homicide file became a ghost story. This is No Mystics, where we chase facts, not legends. So what really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue? The familiar version begins after the murders, with George and Kathleen Lutz buying the house in December 1975. They moved in with their children on December 18th. 28 days later, they left. That number is the impossible fact at the heart of Amityville. A family lived there for less than a month, yet their story helped create one of the most famous haunted house legends in history. The popular belief is simple. The book and film captured a proven supernatural case. And it makes sense why people believed it. The story arrived with real names, a real address, and a real murder case behind it. That combination gives fiction the texture of documentation. A paperback can feel like a case file when it borrows a real street, real victims, and a real trial. A movie can feel like memory when millions watch the same version of events. And in the late 1970s, horror based on supposedly true events had a special power. It blurred the line between investigation and entertainment before viewers had time to check the sources. But here is the first crack. The murders are documented by police, courts, and later legal summaries. The haunting claims are not supported by the same kind of independent physical evidence. That difference sounds small, but it changes the whole case. To understand Amityville, we have to begin before the ghosts. On November 13, 1974, 6 members of the DeFeo family were shot to death inside their home. The victims were Ronald DeFeo Jr., Louise DeFeo, and 4 of their children. Their names were Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. Remembering those names matters because the legend often reduces them to atmosphere. Police and later court summaries placed the killings in the early morning hours. The weapon identified in court records was a .35 caliber Marlin lever-action rifle. A rifle like that is not a vague symbol of violence. It is loud, physical, traceable, and specific enough for a courtroom to test. That detail matters because it was not a vague weapon in a campfire story. It was a specific object inside a specific prosecution. One question haunted investigators before any ghost story did. Why didn't the neighbors hear gunshots? Reports generally describe the victims as found in their beds, with little obvious sign of struggle, though later summaries differ on whether every victim was asleep. Those facts created a disturbing puzzle. But a puzzle is not a portal. Unanswered forensic questions can mean incomplete records, missed witnesses, timing confusion, intoxication, fear, or ordinary human failure. They can also mean that later summaries leave out details investigators discussed at the time. That is why historians treat silence in a record carefully. They do not automatically point to demons, curses, or a possessed house. The court record also gives the story a colder shape. It describes DeFeo leaving the house, disposing of evidence, and later telling others that his family was dead. That sequence matters because it replaces supernatural vagueness with human actions. It also makes the story harder to turn into simple folklore. And this is where the legend begins to distort memory. The real mystery was never whether the walls were evil. The real mystery was how one person could kill 6 people in one house, and why the public stopped asking about that. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was arrested and tried for the killings. His trial opened in October 1975, less than a year after the murders. In November 1975, a jury found him guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He received 6 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life. That court record matters because it gives us a firm floor. We know 6 people were murdered. We know Ronald DeFeo Jr. was convicted. We know later appeals and petitions did not erase that conviction. Federal habeas summaries decades later still treated the conviction as the legal anchor of the case. That matters because later marketing cannot rewrite what a jury already decided. It can only change what the public remembers first. The trial shows how ordinary legal systems handle claims about mental state, responsibility, and conflicting accounts. DeFeo's defense centered on his mental state, including claims about voices and responsibility. The prosecution argued that DeFeo was legally sane, understood his actions, and deliberately carried out the killings. The jury rejected the defense and returned 6 guilty verdicts. That does not answer every question, but it tells us where the evidence is strongest. What we do not know is every human detail inside that house that night. DeFeo gave conflicting accounts over the years. At different times, he shifted explanations, motives, and blame. That is not unusual in notorious murder cases, but it is dangerous for storytellers. A changing account creates empty space, and empty space invites invention. Some questions remained unsettling, including sound, timing, motive, and the lack of struggle. But uncertainty is not the same thing as proof of the paranormal. This is the line the Amityville legend keeps crossing. It takes gaps in a murder file and fills them with a marketable explanation. But responsible investigation works in the opposite direction. It asks what can be checked, who benefits, and where the story changed. That distinction is the key to the entire case. Now the story jumps forward 13 months. George and Kathleen Lutz bought the former DeFeo house. For the Lutz family, this was supposed to be a new home. Instead, they later said the house became unbearable. Their reported experiences included strange sounds, foul smells, cold spots, and disturbing sensations. Those details became famous. But fame is not verification. A claim can be sincerely told and still remain unproven. A family can experience fear without proving the cause of that fear. And a story can grow stronger precisely because it cannot be tested anymore. That is the mechanism most hauntings depend on. By the time outsiders ask for evidence, the original moment has already passed. When I looked at the case this way, the 28 days stopped feeling like proof. They started feeling like the narrow bridge between a documented murder case and a commercial legend. That bridge matters because it is where the story changes category. Before it, we have a homicide case with court-tested facts. After it, we have a haunting narrative moving through interviews, publishers, and studios. That does not prove the Lutz family lied. It means the historian's job is not to choose the scariest explanation. The job is to keep categories clean. And after this point, the evidence gets harder to separate from storytelling. In September 1977, J. Anson's book, The Amityville Horror, was published. It presented the Lutz family's story in a way that felt immediate, intimate, and terrifying. But Anson was not producing a court transcript. He was shaping a readable horror narrative from disputed personal claims. That shift changed the evidence chain. 2 years later, the 1979 film adaptation carried the story far beyond readers. This is the second reveal. The movie did not just popularize the case. It changed what the public remembered the case was about. Before long, Amityville became a brand. The house became a symbol. The crime became backstory. And the DeFeo family, the 6 people who actually died, became almost secondary in their own tragedy. That is the moral problem with Amityville. Not that people told ghost stories. People have always used ghost stories to explain places where violence happened. The problem is when the story becomes so powerful that it replaces the evidence. And Amityville shows the mechanism clearly. First, real violence gives the story gravity. Then personal testimony gives it intimacy. Then publication gives it shape. Then film gives it images people can replay in their heads. Then mass media gives it repetition. Repetition does something powerful to memory. It can make a disputed claim feel like a settled fact. And once that happens, later versions no longer need the original evidence. They only need the shape of the legend. A roofline. 2 windows. A claim that something terrible never really left. That is how a case file becomes folklore. So what was Amityville really? Everything points to one conclusion. It wasn't a proven ghost case. It was a murder case that became a media phenomenon. That explains why the story feels so convincing. It borrowed weight from a real tragedy. Then entertainment turned that weight into atmosphere. The truth is less supernatural, but it is more revealing. Amityville shows how quickly a society can trade hard questions for a better story. And the harder the questions are, the more tempting the better story becomes. And so we return to the house. Not as a portal to another world, but as a case study in memory. This case reminds us that when horror becomes entertainment, victims can disappear twice. First from life, then from the story told afterward. The next buried case file starts with the same test. What survives when the movie poster is removed? I'm here to help you know what the legends leave behind. What case should we place beside the Amityville Horror File next? The city, the claim, and the record we should test. See you in the next case file.